Before moving on, I have to make a personal statement or a little rant. I'm so sickened that a normal citizen is called upon to defend his culture and heritage as if such a circumstance is normal. It's not, or at least it shouldn't be. It's only required because governments themselves have been totally blinkered and inept, refusing to listen, ignoring the majority that employs them. I and other patriots are forced into intervening, taking up banners, although we have no wish to do so. If governments viewed this as being obstructive or presumptive, I would have some sympathy if they were earning their keep, but they aren't. Claims of Islamophobia or far right are made by them, and yet they're only possible because of their failures. I feel a bit like that now. I'm not an expert politician or lawyer, and I want to rest and look forward to the festive season. I have instead to beg for the patience of viewers and sustain myself with silly thoughts, such as it's a small rock that creates a landslide. Presumptive in itself, maybe, but I'm not apologetic. Otherwise, we would all just go home and vegetate. So here goes with a new subject. The very concept of democracy is under threat through demographic pressure. And in this video, we'll discuss methods of firstly curbing it and secondly, removing that threat completely. But a clear understanding of the problem are a prerequisite to the solution. The UK is still within the top 10 economic entities, but it has shed much of its manufacturing industry and now relies heavily on the just-in-time system, importing for its supermarkets, industrial supplies, medicines, etc., and 50% of our daily food intake. That means that daily arrivals of some 10,000 freight trucks in Dover alone and 11,000 containers arriving every day in Felixstowe. Across the country, more than 200 ferries operate daily. And that's before we even mention the Channel Tunnel, which carries over 3,300 trucks and about 5,500 cars every single day. Britain has got a coastline, but not many realise it's almost 20,000 miles of coastline. And there are over 200 small ports. But we know that any quiet cove will provide a secure landing for a small boat. Have you any idea how many airstrips and landing zones there are in the UK? There's over 2,300 airports or landing strips. Many of them are even unlicensed and operate on a trust basis. If you're getting the picture, it doesn't matter what stringent laws are passed. Legislation intended to control illegal immigration is about effective as a sieve. In peacetime, with our population going about their normal lives and subversive elements on both sides of the channel helping each other, it's not almost impossible to cut out unwanted migrants. It is absolutely impossible. There's an obvious conclusion. If they have the will and they have the way, as one avenue closes, they open another, infinitum. Illegal immigration can't be stopped physically. And there are two main driving factors behind the waves of illegal immigrants. Whilst obvious, their significance is often underestimated. In many countries, water and electric are sparse and sporadic. Inevitably, this leads to problems of hygiene. Pensions and healthcare are non-existent, and survival against hunger is a matter of personal effort, where life expectancy is far below that of the West. It will be shown later that our ability to provide charity to alleviate those problems is not enhanced by migration. In fact, migration has just the opposite effect. A theocracy that has totalitarian aspirations can't abide a closed border. Here's a quote from Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, in 2006 to 10. There are signs that Allah will grant victory to Islam in Europe, without swords, without guns, without conquest. We don't need terrorists. We don't need suicide bombers. The 50 million Muslims in Europe will turn it into a Muslim continent within a few decades. Let that one sink home. That may not be a majority view, but there is good evidence that it's followed by many, and a rebuttal from the majority is rare. Even some Arabic states are now warning against it as a threat to global stability. Not speaking up in the early years allowed a totalitarian state to prosper in Germany, and we know where that led. The second group that have cause to ensure our borders remain porous are loosely grouped as the criminal element that runs a second economy within Britain. Although it profits in billions each year, it pays no taxes and contributes nothing to the welfare state that allows it to flourish. The welfare state pays for the health care of those being exploited and for the schooling of their offspring. A bizarre but flourishing state of affairs. The true lot of many illegal immigrants is far removed from the rosy picture of those in 4- and 5-star hotels. Many have borrowed heavily to fund their journey, and thereafter they're cruelly blackmailed or exploited to work for low or non-existent pay, and they're housed in their thousands in unregulated housing. Look at any drone view of our major cities and see thousands of sheds and garages built in gardens and drives without permission. They're everywhere. Many could be legitimately demolished, and yet corrupt landlords cook their books and they grow richer and become more influential in council matters. That's the way it is. Cash earns respectability and prominence. You can ask any hotel manager or car salesman. £775 million are sent abroad as private transfers per month. 775 million from the UK. Not business investment or debt payments, just private cash to friends and relatives. Mostly in Bangladesh, Pakistan or India. And if only 4% of their population sought to join their family members in Britain, they could exceed 76 million people. Do you know that any council officer wishing to inspect suspected buildings must declare the visit? Failing to give a warning requires a judge's authorised warrant. So it's a perilous situation for councils. But those problems have remained unaddressed for over 50 years. Laws that required landlords to verify the identity and status of those paying them rents, quite a sensible policy, was largely rejected simply by the landlord's failure to comply. If you don't like the law, just forget it. Criminals became the tail that wagged the dog. In summary so far then, we may not like it, but as a democracy, we can live with criminality. Those are the traits that ensure the survival of humanity as a species and are loosely known as the 7 deadly sins. But what a democracy can't survive is a totalitarian theocracy in its midst. I've already devoted a complete video to how that must eventually be defeated. But this video is devoted to immigration, and obviously not all immigration seekers are from a theocracy. The colour of a person's skin was never an indicator of motherly love, fatherly honour, political ideology, or even a person's faith. Discrimination is wrong, and we have legislation to quell tribal inadequacies by enforcing law equally across all citizens. And as the Americans love to say, it is as it is. But that doesn't mean that all cultures or methods of government are of equal merit. Some nations fill a few pages, others fill books, but the British Empire and our Industrial Revolution fill libraries, largely of world-benefiting invention and common law. Quite simply, we have to empty the queue. We have to empty Calais by simply changing the mind of those preparing to leave their homelands now, by making the journey not worth the effort and the cost not worth the prize. In our green and pleasant lands, how do we do that? How can we do it humanely but effectively? For years, citizens of democracies have been called upon to endanger their heritage and survivability just by being charitable and providing a haven to asylum seekers in need. It's known that not all cultures are in favour of democracy as their long-term chosen method of governance, and yet the government allows them to settle and gain citizenship regardless. Citizenship, obviously, gives the immigrant voting rights. That never made any sense to the thinking electorate, and it doesn't make sense now. It's like a ticking bomb. In Europe, during the Second World War, thousands of refugees thronged the roads, moving towards safety. But there were women, children, and old men. No uninjured men of fighting age were expected or even allowed to be in that throng. Lampposts nearby often bore terrible testimony to that fact. By that reasoning, I submit that the arrival of so many fighting age men today are obviously not refugees. They are uninvited settlers taking advantage of gullible appeasers. This then is the kern of the problem. Why should it be understood and accepted that extended residency will lead automatically to citizenship? It's an idea born in a worldwide organization that needs funds, rather than being born in any democracy planning its own destruction. So there is a new word that must be introduced here. A simple 9-letter word that's to precede all the words that describe asylum seeker. And that word is temporary. Examples? Get used to it. Temporary resident, temporary refugee, temporary asylum seeker, temporary applicant. And by doing that, we have a temporary agenda. As temporary citizens, They obviously do not hold the right of a citizen. They do not have the right to a lifelong welfare, and they don't have the right to vote. The ticking clock of demographics has stopped suddenly, as if this idea would be adopted by other democracies. It stopped worldwide. In all probability, so too has the main flow of migrants, and that means Cali will empty. First, we need to get the boots onto the right feet. It starts with a simple emphasis that's been warped out of all reason and common sense. As a sovereign nation, our government alone may decide whom it funds and under what circumstances. We, have the right to demand cooperation and information in exchange for providing a haven with associated costs. The haven is still being offered in a fully humanitarian manner, and every applicant will be treated fairly in exactly the same manner without favour, but all will be temporary. At the outset, there is to be a signed agreement to the fact that a haven is provided by the host nation upon a temporary basis, and that the host alone will decide if and when it's safe for the individual to return to his or her own country. The applicant doesn't need to agree. It's a free agent, and they may move elsewhere to a different country if they so wish. But the offer is clear. No cooperation equals no welfare. That reasserts the right of the state above the rights of the applicants, as it obviously is and should be. Any agreement made with outside agencies that would seek to remove that right from a sovereign nation are not compliant with good governance. They're an abomination left over from a prior age before modern technology, and they must be nullified. This is a good time to remember that democracies are having their decisions thrust upon them as a defense mechanism in order to survive. Survival isn't just dependent upon the defeat of demographics, though. It's dependent upon the finances of the state being able to overcome the demands being placed upon them by unauthorized immigrants arriving in their thousands month after month. One can be just as deadly as the other. There are many reasons for our national debt, and migrants are not the main one. But they do have a major role now and in the future. Debts already stand in their trillions. In June alone, 1 month, our debt servicing bill was £16.4 billion. 16.4 billion. That's what we have to make every month before paying a penny towards welfare or the NHS. And yet we continue playing Santa on a grand scale, which is, of course, absolute bloody nonsense. A word of caution that signifies a lot. The top 1% of investors in the world are no longer investing in Western banks. They're buying up thousands of hectares of food-producing lands and investing in futuristic electronic banking systems. But what do they know, huh? The answer of the 1% are the answer to our dilemma as to whether change is imperative. The true cost of illegal immigration is often bandied about in billions, but in truth, it can't be accurately totaled because it often exists in emergency expenditure columns. The numbers, by definition, are unknown and make a fool of budgets and planning, which is the main purpose of government. Like a pendulum, costs continue to swing throughout an individual's lifetime. Hotels, welfare, child support, schooling, NHS, housing support, mobility support, carers allowance, and even old age pensions. Those costs will vary with each individual, and in some cases, the person may not have contributed a single penny. All costs sit in different ledgers, and yet all costs fall upon the same taxpayer. Which is beyond dispute is this: without change, those costs are permanent, accumulative, and intergenerational. Across the world, tens of millions are fleeing the place they were born. Some will return, many will not. Even a small fraction of the 123 million already displaced translates into overwhelming numbers. New conflicts and crises add to this total each year, an estimated 25 million this year alone. Climate damage displaces tens of millions more inside fragile states, converting internal movement into permanent outward pressure. At the same time, population growth in those same regions adds tens of millions annually to the pool from which future migrants are drawn. Surveys suggest that roughly 900 million adults worldwide would emigrate permanently if they could. 900 million. But those numbers don't come equally from developing countries and democracies. It's about a third of all adults in developing countries who would move if they could. A third. Long-term migration is already historic in scale. People living in a country other than which they were born has grown to roughly 304 million, nearly double a previous figure, showing that long-term mobility itself is a growing phenomenon with democratic significance. The real significance lies not in any single figure, but in the fact that these pressures accumulate, reinforce one another, and reoccur year after year, generation after generation. They're never ending. Natural human sympathy demands practical help from those able to do so. But when a contributing country is itself overwhelmed by cost or capacity, it loses that ability to help anyone at all, and even risks reducing itself to the same expanding tide of humanity. So, our self-preservation is of benefit to others too. We have discussed the whys and wherefores, but this video can't come to an end without outlining how critical it is to pay attention to detail. Any system offering a temporary haven is meaningless without a secure means of identification. Without it, individuals simply disappear into the grey economy, becoming invisible, untaxed, and they're no longer in lawful oversight. The futility of such actions must be clear in advance. Essential benefits are locked without correct documentation being produced regularly as the key. Breaking the agreement or working to circumvent it naturally ends the period of cooperation with the host country, and deportation follows as a consequence. Governments already accept the principle of a national ID, and many costs are partially acknowledged. However, an ID that is not genuinely unique, omitting fingerprints, DNA, or robust biometrics, such as facial scanning, is a waste of time and doomed to exploitation. The cost differences between a lackluster ID and a successful, fully functional one is measured in pence, whereas the cost of failure or success are measured in billions. British patriots in particular must understand that the proposed ID cards are not only inevitable, but advantageous. I know that some are against the ID card in principle, because sooner or later they believe that they will have a security breach, but it's still a governmental decision that needs support, not opposition. Despite the misgivings, the march of AI doesn't stop. It's relentless. And even the gravity of a possible partial security breach does not weigh as heavily as inevitable bankruptcy and the loss of sovereignty. When correctly applied, a secure and unique identity system will automatically remove associated distortions such as block voting manipulation and postal vote irregularities. Multiple benefit claimants defrauding councils will also be scuppered. It's time to dot the I, cross the T, and bring this video to an end. Under any marriage, the spouse and any offspring automatically adopt the nationality of the temporary migrant. This arrangement is known in advance and carries no legal import for claims towards permanence. The system remains binding, predictable, and enforceable, and all consequences of knowingly entering into such arrangements lie with those who do so. The clarity and enforceability of a temporary status ensures fairness, protects democratic governance, and preserves the integrity of public resources. Should most other democracies adopt a similar stance, that happy result would be beneficial in two additional ways. The reluctance or refusal of any country to take back those who had left to seek a haven would not remain unnoticed. The concerted efforts of many would remove that reluctance very quickly. The pressures and systematic problems associated with untold millions moving unchecked are sharply reduced through the foreknowledge that certain agendas are no longer achievable. Temporary status is not simply an administrative tool. It is a strategic safeguard, a final bulwark against the unfolding consequences of untold millions moving unchecked. It's the only feasible way to make humane assistance sustainable whilst preventing the collapse of societal order. Planned and invited migration differs from unplanned and unwanted immigration, just like a songbird differs from a vulture. Churchill stated that half measures availed us nothing, and patriots have to ensure that that statement remains a judgment from the past and not as an indicator for the future. So, I've played my part and my quiver has one barbed bolt less. God bless. Auf Wiedersehen from Lord Urchin. Bye.